So
Exactly.
I'm actually very, very excited to to have this guest with us tonight. I've known Makayla Wheeler is a young filmmaker out of Melbourne, Florida, and I've known Makayla for a long, long time. And she's got a brand new documentary film coming out that's premiering next week, which is pretty exciting, called Double or Nothing. And I'll let her talk about it, and we'll take a look at that. But more importantly, for a lot of you, Makayla is the type of person that you should be emulating when you are out there looking at doing this. And I say that because she's able to create a business, a production company that's a business that works off both national, regional, and local clients. But importantly, she's incorporated what she loves, which is a love of nature and water, into all of her work. So, with that in mind, let me introduce you to Makayla. Um, Welcome, Makayla, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's start out by talking about, a little bit about you. Can you tell them, give everybody your background?
Yeah, so I have always just had a love for movies. When I saw my first movie in the theater, it was actually Chronicles of Narnia back when I was 7. And from there, um my passion for filmmaking started at a really young age. And I ended up, at the age of 12 or 13, wanting to be in acting, and because that's kind of like every young girl's dream. And then quickly realized I wanted to be behind the camera because you have more control. And at that same time, I was actually horseback riding. And so we would take our little iPod Nanos out and they would shoot video, and we would hang them up in trees, and we would make like corny adventure movies and everything. And from there in high school, it just kind of grew into a passion. I ended up meeting Mr. Randy um, as a result of doing some commercials, and my mom actually called him up and was like, "Hey, would you mentor my daughter?" So I just want to toot your horn, Mr. Randy. You've been just like an amazing mentor for so many years. So you guys are really, really lucky to have Randy. But yeah, I started, you encouraged me like, hey, if you want to make films and if you want to direct, like go out and make films. And so that's kind of what I did at a young age. I like around 13, 14, 15. Just kind of started making films and decided to open up like my LLC for my production company with the help of my parents. And so, yeah, just filmmaking has just been a huge passion of mine from a young age, and it's kind of grown. Now I'm almost 26. Um, but yeah, and it's always just been really tied to love of the outdoors and adventure, and also the ocean. So
Yeah. And so you've expanded out, obviously. You are a drone videographer and you are a underwater videographer. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to get into both of those?
yeah, so I don't know. I just always have really loved like shooting stuff from different angles and always trying to look for that shot that's like new and different. And so I was working on a documentary about the Florida Springs, for those of you that live
And
in Florida.
how old were you? Let's talk about that. How old were you when you started doing that?
So I wanted to do a documentary about the Florida Springs, and I was 15. So we just traveled around and went to the Florida Springs. And I just really wanted to see like a vantage point of these springs because they're like jewels in the middle of the woods. And at that point, I ended up getting a friend who had a plane to like fly me around and try to get footage out of the plane with a big camera, and it just didn't work. Like it wasn't stable. It was like crushing kind of because I had this vision of like I really wanted to get this beautiful aerial view. So that led me to pursuing the drone stuff back in 2013 when the first Phantom came out. It had, no gimbal, no like way to see FPV, nothing. And but it was a start and I was able to get some cool shots. So that was, kind of the drone stuff. And then the underwater stuff, I just love the water and shooting in that medium. And it's just such a cool immersive experience. And it's very hot, like different medium even than shooting, traditional cinematography in the air.
We got a question already. Julie, you have a question?
Yes, I actually had I recently saw a video of these scuba divers who were recording, and during a 7 point something earthquake. Have you ever seen or caught footage like that during your time?
No, I think I've seen that video actually. That was like insane. I think I saw that on Instagram, but no, I've not been in that situation before, thank God.
Like,
Um,
have you ever uh seen some really interesting sights while filming underwater?
yeah, I have nothing like that. Like one of the coolest things that I got to do as part of this documentary, and we were able to incorporate it into the story, was dive with sharks in the Bahamas, like these reef sharks. And it was a little scary, but it was also like one of the coolest experiences. So I would definitely say like that was really fun.
And so how long did it take you to really become good at shooting underwater, and how long did it take you to become good at being a drone videographer?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't even, I feel like it's constantly a journey. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like I've arrived. I think it's always just constantly like pushing for like excellence in everything that you do. And obviously that's something that, you kind of inspired in me. But I do feel like, as much as you can go out and do things, go out and shoot, like shoot, shoot, shoot. And you should want to shoot because, like, hopefully you're shooting something that you're passionate about, And so, like, there is really no shortcut. It's just having the experience, in situations with your gear. And I think also surrounding yourself with people that are better than you and that push you like to the next level, I think is really helpful as well. So that you don't kind of just like hammock out in like, oh, this is good enough, But I think that's something I've been really like realizing recently.
It doesn't matter. So sorry, I'm just rewinding this. I was looking, and so one of the things I just have to say is that when the first time I saw some of Makayla's work, we actually did a short film together just to be true, transparent. It's called Horse Sense. That was, I
Yeah.
think that's her first short film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty fun. And then I saw the Springs of video. Again, you were 15 years old and you shot all the aerial stuff, you shot all the underwater stuff, you shot all the above ground stuff. And then you also got a British narrator, a guy who sounded like he was from directly out of the BBC casting call. And then you also handled all the music for it and you edited the whole thing yourself. And again, how old were you?
It was, I think it's 15. Yeah.
15, 16. And so, when I showed it to a Nat Geo guy, woman actually, an executive from Nat Geo, who was kind of blown away with it. And she kept saying to me, "How old is she?" And I was like, "She's 16." It was like, "Oh my God." And so it looks like it's a Nat Geo, documentary about Florida Springs. And so that was it. And then besides getting into underwater and aerial photography. You also expanded out, and you really kind of have a kind of a broad base vertical markets of clients that you work for. Everybody from Roxy and Ron Johns to different that you do a lot of traveling with groups that you do freedom. You did a freedom hike. So you do those types of things. You did a video for a local kayaking company that was on the bioluminescent waters here in Central Florida at certain times of the years. And out of that, you ended up selling a bunch of stock footage of that bioluminescent footage as well. And if you go to Makayla's website, which I'll put up in the chat, it's mgwpro.com. So go there and check that out. Um, and you will be pretty amazed at, if you haven't seen bioluminescence, um, uh, pro.com. I just put that in. Check that out. You can also see some of her other work, but you also expanded out into commercials and you did like branded internet branding videos for different people. And throughout that whole thing, you're still tying that into your love for water and nature. Can you kind of, that was a conscious choice by you?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, like when I started the production company and I kind of transitioned it over full time about 5 years ago, I really like have started local with, local businesses and, I do some weddings as well. And um, I think that, it's really been a fine line because when you want to make a business full time, there's definitely a fine line of like keeping your passion and keeping your focus like where you want to go and that like niche of where you want to go, but also balancing like I need to pay the bills, like, obviously doing consistent work. And so that's kind of, I think, been an ever changing, ever and evolving journey for me. And talking with like other filmmakers, I think that that's very much a part of everyone's journey in this industry. And I think this industry is really changing even from when I like got into it, full time 5 years ago. And I'm like having to pivot and adapt and figure it out. But I think it really is been a conscious choice of like I really love the outdoors and I love working in, near the ocean and doing that lifestyle storytelling type work. So I really purposely intentionally tried to put myself and make connections in those spaces to kind of bring me more of that work. But at the same time, like there's definitely, I'm doing weddings or I'm doing, other things as well, to be able to kind of diversify out and I think, having to do a wide range of things makes you a better filmmaker because, I think each thing kind of sharpens skills for another thing, like if you're shooting weddings, like for example, that really helps with documentaries because it's sort of the same thing. Um, so yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So and so let's jump into another realm here about the drones at first. So your very first drone was 3DR Solo?
Yeah, the 3DR. Well, no, it was the Phantom, the first
Phantom?
Phantom that came out back in 2013. And then we switched over to the 3DR robotics. It was the black solo drone.
Anybody remember those drones? Anybody know about those drones? So
No.
this is a cautionary tale about new technology. There's an old saying. I knew a guy in New York when HD first started out who committed several $1 million to analog HD equipment, and then overnight the HD people came out and said we're not doing analog, we're doing digital, so it was gone. And his favorite, I saw him at a convention about a month after he closed his business down, lost millions of dollars, and he had a big animation company in New York as well. And he said in this thing, well, you can tell who all the pioneers are in this business. We're the ones with all the arrows sticking out of our backs. And 3DR Solos, the 3DR Solo was a good. The guy who was the partner in 3DR Solo left and started a company. Anybody know what that company was called? DJI. And so that's, and 3D robotics said, okay, we're not going to do, consumer drones anymore. We're going to do commercial. And so they kind of left everybody hanging dry. And I think I owned three of those drones at the time. And so now, what are you flying?
So I'm back flying the DJI line. I fly right now the Mavic. It's Air, yeah, the Air S2 or 2S. I always forget whether it's the 2S. It's like the S comes first or the 2 comes first. But yeah, that's what I'm flying right now. I
And
kind of like the versatility of it, for being in more like minimalistic environments.
yeah, and so somebody was asking about with the changes in FAA rules, how do you think it will affect what you do with drones?
what rules specifically are you talking about?
Okay, I'll unmute myself for this one.
Yeah.
I'm talking about remote ID. I'm talking about
I do.
hello there. I'm talking about the fact that Congress is trying to push through getting rid of DJI and Autel drones, different things like that.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
well, that will never happen. They won't get rid of DJI. They can actually. I think what you're going to find overall over the next several years is that they're going to relax the drone stuff a little bit more, and so you're already seeing that now with manufacturers like DJI coming out with 300 grams. I think that's what it is, where you don't
Well,
have.
that's for the registration portion. I'm talking about
Yeah,
remote ID and stuff like that. That's supposed to be enforced as of March.
yeah. So that's that. You're going to have to keep up with the regulations. You need to be a certified drone operator, and I can't stress
Yeah.
that too enough. If you're going to fly drones, you need to be a certified drone operator. I can't tell you how many drone shoots I've been out on, where I've been with certified drone operators, and we've launched drones, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 people will show up that are just kids with drones, flying the drones all over the place, and so that gets to be really dangerous.
Yeah, I'm a Part 107 pilot, have been for 6 years. But they're changing the regulations for stuff like that with the introduction of remote ID, where if you don't have remote ID, you can only fly certain areas. Of
Yeah.
course, it's getting quite intense. They pushed it back several months already, but as of March, it's supposed to come into effect.
Yeah, Frankie, there is a bunch of websites out there specifically for if you want to become a certified drone operator. There's all kinds of schools and the FAA. You can go to their website and do that. But that's a big thing. And so drones are constantly changing. I mean, it seems like there's a new drone out every month. And so if you're wanting to get into this, I would advise you to go to under 300 gram drone and learn how to fly on a really cheap drone. I've crashed several of them, and then once you get kind of good at it, it's like anything else, you got to practice. So and then let's talk about underwater stuff. Now you shoot primarily now with the FX3.
Yeah, so I just got underwater housing for the FX3, Sony FX3.
Yeah.
And I would say, it's crazy out of the three, like out of the drone. Honestly, the drones now are so automated, they're not that hard to fly at all. Like pretty much anyone can fly them. It's just really learning, like practicing how to get cinematic moves out of them, and a lot of them have automated systems as well that you just tell them what to do and it'll fly its own route. I don't like doing that personally. Feels a little out of control, but I think the thing just to add with the drones is like really practicing like the cinematic moves, doing like the 2-axis movement and stuff, because those can really lend itself like well to cinematography. But I would say as far as the underwater stuff, out of the three things, like, cinematography, the drone stuff, and the underwater, I feel like is definitely the hardest because you're working in like a medium that has different rules in a sense than the air. The light plays differently. You have a lot of dynamics with light and water working in that medium, and even just the glass, how much glass you have to go through. So the underwater stuff I think can be the most technical in a sense, and I found it the hardest in some sense, because also like you have to be comfortable and know how to maneuver in the water as well. So I feel like I'm still really like learning and just learning a lot and kind of diving into that from people who, are super, super experienced with, shooting, surfing, or diving, or whatever it might be.
And you talked to a lot of people. You just recently changed ports, didn't you?
Yeah, so like crazy thing, I didn't realize like how technical stuff is, but like it just gets very technical between, I don't know if any of you guys have seen, like some people shoot on a flat port and some people will shoot on a dome. And the way that the mechanics of the light really change between between a flat port, like the distortion that you get is very different on a flat port versus a dome port. And so I was having, just for example, was having focusing issues where, you know, I would do those above below shots on like an 8-inch dome, and above would be in focus and below would be out of focus, or vice versa. I couldn't get both in like those really cool shots. And come to find out, you know, it gets very technical with like how the dome creates a virtual image that it's focusing on. And so I ended up having to shoot to a flat, or change to a flat port that has like less distortion to really be able to get those images where you can, you know, come from below and go up and kind of like sit at the water's edge, or, you know, vice versa. So like underwater cinematography is amazingly like rewarding, but it can also be very like technical as well, challenging.
And tiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to like troubleshoot it all.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
haven't seen the underwater rigs without the lights, they're big hunking things that are about this big, and you have to hold them out in front of you, and you know there's monitoring issues that you got to worry about, and then lighting underwater if you get down below certain depth, and so there's a lot of things. A lot of people are talking about, you know, still the drone stuff and becoming certified. How would you say? A lot of people tell me, you know, that I talk to about certification. They always say, I always hear the same thing. It's kind of like taking a pilot's license. It's kind of like getting a pilot's license. You have to know a lot about aeronautics and stuff. And so, just so in case you guys know, we talk. You hear me talk a lot about PPA, Professional Photographers of America. Professional Photographers of America. If you sign up as as a member of that, you'll also get the $15,000 worth of insurance, production insurance, if you sign up for it. But they also offer a certified professional drone certificate. So you can become a they do certified professional photographers and certified professional drone operators. So it's kind of cool. And a lot of people don't know about that. Um, so and I've had a lot of people who have gone to the big drones, to the Inspires, and you know all the bigger drones, and they always tend to come back to the smaller portable drones because of the ease of use of those things. And of course, the technology continues to advance, and the all the new stuff that's starting to come out. So let's talk a little bit about you know, for you as an independent at having your own company. How hard was it was it hard for you to start your own business?
Um,
Well,
yeah,
you had help, yeah.
yeah, I was lucky that my parents were supportive, but I feel like I started so young that people didn't take me seriously. So I think that was like a challenge, and then obviously I kind of grew into that. But I think like, you know, starting your own business, like this is like any other business that you start, where you really have to kind of wear all the hats. You know, you have to market and you have to advertise, and you know, you obviously have to grow your craft of filmmaking, but you have to do all the other things too. You have to, you know, do accounting and like really left brain non-creative stuff. So I think that that's a challenge. And then I think one of my challenges, you know, that I'm still working through is, you know, this business is really so heavily about who you know, and those connections. Like connections and references in this business is like gold. Like it's invaluable when you know, I think are any small business, but especially in the creative industry. And so I think it's, you know, for me, it's overcoming that challenge of, you know, networking and who do I want to reach out to, and how do I put myself in those places of, you know, meeting people, whatever direction I'm going. Because obviously you all probably aren't all going to be going towards like the ocean stuff. It might be something totally different, like AI, or, you know, so it's kind of a little bit of strategy of finding the right people and the right opportunities to and the right connections in order to kind of, you know, get where it is you're wanting to go, if that makes sense.
But you're a one-man band. You know, you do the website, you do the marketing, you do, you know, you do the billing, you do, you know, you're out there hustling and getting it all done. And you're and so one of the big things that I want you to really talk about, because I think you're a prime example of this, is as a independent filmmaker, how important it is it for people to know how to edit?
Yeah, I think it's so important. Like, what is it called? Auteur filmmaking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that term of where like you should be able to do everything. And I've heard that from other filmmakers of like, if you can do everything, like if you know how to do pre-production and you know something about sound and you know something about lighting and something about, you know, you edit, like that's just going to make you better at whatever position, you know, you want to do if there's a specific position that you want to do. And that is like invaluable. So I think like it's incredibly important, I feel like, to know how to edit, because if you're just wanting to be a cinematographer or director, you will know like the little nuances of what's going to cut and what's not going to cut, you know? So I think it's incredibly valuable.
So what you're saying is you're editing as you shoot.
Yeah, shoot to edit.
Shoot to edit. That's it. So I got a couple of questions here. Anthony, sorry, I didn't. I saw you had your hand raised earlier. Do you have a question?
Actually, I did, and thank you so much. So first thing is thank you for being here. This is awesome. So when you started out, and I know you've moved on to the Air 2, one of the things that I noticed that you mentioned is that you are now doing underwater as well as a drone. Is there an ultimate goal that you have in mind that you don't mind sharing with us? Because I thought it was awesome that you kind of gave me a little bit more into how things work in the industry. And let me be specific about what I mean by that. One of the things that we all, in my opinion, as storytellers want to do is we all want to be able to be filmmakers just like you, as well as Professor Baker. One of the things that I find difficulty is I know in my case, ultimately, yeah, you want to be a filmmaker, but you also got to pay the bills. And I like the fact that you pointed that out. So with all that being said, thank you for that. But what is it that you ultimately want to do?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I feel like I've kind of had to do it all and learn it all, but I think like I really there, you know, becomes a point where it's can get overwhelming and then you start to realize this is why you have credits that are 10 minutes long because you can't do it all. So, I think for me I'm kind of at a point now where like my I think my end goal is like I want to continue to direct or be a cinematographer. And I would love to, you know, kind of work in the sweet spot of not being on huge productions, but being more like under 10 people, you know, very kind of medium to small productions that's shooting like lifestyle or story branded content for whether it's brands or, you know, short documentaries for brands. And I would love to, you know, be able to focus on one part of the cinematography. So if I'm coming on, you know, I would kind of focus on the drone stuff, or if I'm coming on, and I have done this for a couple shoots this past year, I'm like just handling the underwater rig, which I love, and not feeling like I have to switch. Because I think for me on a lot of my shoots, if I'm a woman show, I'm having to do the drone, the ground, and the underwater kind of all at the same time, like spinning all these plates. I don't want to have to do that anymore. I really want to like hone down and be very excellent, you know, at one role, and it's not so overwhelming, if it makes sense, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Anthony.
thank you.
Rashid, you had a question too?
Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, how do you spell auteur filmmaking? How do you spell that?
Auteur, I believe. Auteur comes from the French New Wave cinema of the 70s, Francis Truffaut and those guys. And it basically means that, one person has the vision, okay, an auteur film. And so a lot of people will tell you that, that's why a director should have the vision. The director is usually the auteur, it's his vision. You work with people like Wes Anderson, but in modern filmmaking today, it's a team sport, and as all of you are finding out, and Makayla will talk to you about, when you're a one person band and you're out there doing it yourself, it's hard. It's really difficult. And if you start as you start working with crews, and there's a there's a point where if you get too big a crew, God, you just slow down. It's just like, it takes forever to do stuff. But there's a, like I'm like Makayla. I like working with like small crews, 10, 15 people, on shows. You can do a lot with that many people. But again, doing it all by yourself, man, even today, after doing this for so long, going out and doing one man band stuff for me is like, I get home and I am just like beat because you go nonstop. You don't stop. It's just like, and then you're thinking about, okay, what about tomorrow? And okay, what do I need to do? And then you get home and you got all this other stuff that you got to do to prep. And so it's an awful lot of work. But you have to have the vision, and I think one of the big things that I think differentiates Makayla from a lot of the people that I know is that she has a goal and a vision in mind when she does something. And so I'll answer a couple more questions here. Ariel, you've got a question, and then I want to jump into the documentary because I think it's important for us to spend some time talking about that. Ariel?
Hi. So I just wanted to ask, like, I know as somebody who
Hello.
hello. I know as somebody who definitely has like some big ideas, one of the things that I struggle with is kind of that doubt over whether or not I can necessarily pull it off or whether or not I might be able to accomplish what I want to do. So I was wondering if you ever experienced those anxieties, because it sounds like you've engaged in some pretty massive undertakings on your own. And how did you overcome those?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think like you do have to be somewhat realistic, right? So it's like you can't be thinking I'm going to make Star Wars, like as a beginning filmmaker. So there is a little bit of a reality check there, but I think if there's something that you're passionate about, like start small. Like you don't want to, I think it's more important to start than to try and like create a vision so big that it becomes overwhelming and then you don't want to do it. So I guess like my advice would be to start with what you're passionate about and think about the resources that you have at your disposal to make that happen, and try to start, small. And really, I think it's a mix of like, yes, you do have to be realistic, but also, don't be limited by your own kind of glass ceiling, or your own doubts. Really just put it all out there, and then, the results are going to be what the results are going to be, or do your very best, and let the chips fall where they may. Is that helpful? Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So when I describe Makayla to people, usually the first word I use is fearless. So she really is fearless about things. And so we have a couple of other questions and we get this question a lot, Makayla. How do you set your rates based off of projects and the different aspects of time and production value?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that is probably one of the hardest things about this business. And that is something that I'm still learning. And I ask people that are like, farther along than I am. I would say there's a couple things that I have learned. And that is, if you want to make this a career, it does need to be a business. And so you need to treat it like a business. And I think one of the hardest things for us is, if you're creative like me, and I'm sure that's probably the majority of everyone, is like, it's like, it is your passion, but if you're going to make a full-time career out of it, then you need to be thinking of it as a business. And so, when it comes to pricing structure and stuff, obviously you want to kind of like delineate out, your equipment costs versus your day rate versus like editing. You really want to kind of break down those costs. And it's just like simple things of like, charge for your gear separately than you would for your like, just like your creative fee kind of, was advice that I was given actually, of like, you should be treating every piece of gear you own as a rental. So you like get on look at, you know, what an FX3, for example, rents for on Lens Depot or wherever it is. And you should be like, those little things like add up. You should be charging for that separately than, you know, maybe your day rate or your creative fee, which is kind of like for you to come along as the creative, right? But you know, pricing, I think I've had to be flexible in this industry too. Like you can set, you know, up a really great pricing structure, but I think there will always be times where, you know, you listen to the project's needs and you kind of can stretch and flex. And I think you have to be in this industry. You can't be so rigid of like, well, this is my day rate. I'm, you know, only going to charge that, because you do have to consider like, okay, this brand is a bigger brand or this brand is a smaller brand. So I think flexibility, but also owning your value. Because I think a lot of us as creatives, like we undervalue our work. And so because maybe it comes easy to us, or maybe we don't have confidence, which is something that like I feel like I still struggle with. But realizing like, no, you do have a really valuable set of skills that, you know, as you cultivate them, you should be paid for them. So
yeah, and Makayla and I have this conversation a lot, you know. And so one of the big things that I say to everybody is communicate. You know, this is a communication industry, but we are horrible at communicating. So if you're working with a client, there's a two-way communication process. And so you ask them, what's your budget? You know, that's part of the whole, you know, pre-production process of doing the needs analysis with the client and trying to figure out what they want to do. You know, I always ask them, what's your budget? And then I always follow that up with, why is that your budget? I mean, how'd you come up with that? You know, because a lot of times they don't know. They just made up a number and thought that was great. And so you'll find that if you communicate with a client and you talk back and forth, and you can, you know, say, this is my budget and this is, you know, this is what I'm charging and this is why I'm charging that, you know, that's it. And then you got, you know, sometimes you have to make the decision where they don't have the money to do that. And then you have to just decide, well, am I going to do this time, or I'm just going to blow that off? And you got to not be afraid to say no. You got to turn down
yeah,
jobs. When I first
yeah.
started, I took everything, no matter what. And so it wasn't until I started turning down jobs that my rates went up, and, you know, I was able to pick and choose the jobs that I want. So let's, before we run out of time, I just want to get into this. Can you set up the documentary for us and tell us about what the documentary is and how you got involved with it and how long you've been working on it and what's going on with it right now?
Yeah, so basically this documentary, Double or Nothing, it's a 44-minute film, and it's basically I'm working with a nonprofit foundation out of West Palm Beach, and they really had the vision for the documentary. They basically host an event every year called the Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis, which is an 80-mile paddleboard race from the Bahamas back to Florida. And it's, the foundation is for people, is to help people with cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic lung disease. So I ended up meeting, so fun fact, if you're looking for like brand work or anything in that realm, like the more commercial side, trade shows are a great way. Like wholesale trade shows are like a gold mine. It's a little weird because like you have to kind of get in and there's like a wholesale team there, so it isn't really their marketing team, but sometimes like if you're there, you know, people are there to network. Anyways, I digress. So I ended up meeting the executive director, Travis Suit, at that surf expo, and that kind of sparked this relationship with him. As a producer, he was looking for a director and a production company to produce a film about a gentleman that he had met at the Carolina Cup, which is a paddleboard race in North Carolina. And this gentleman's name was Scott Johnson. And Scott is a cystic fibrosis warrior and just has a miraculous story. He was days away from dying. Right around 9/11, his lung function had decreased so much that he was literally single days away from dying, and he ended up getting a double lung transplant and had a miraculous recovery, which double lung transplants are not a great rate of success, especially after 5 years, but he's been over 20 years with his transplant, and he's gone on to run in Ironmans and finished an Ironman, and just really an inspirational person. And so They wanted to kind of tell his backstory and this miraculous journey through the lens of him participating in the crossing, which is the 80-mile paddleboard race from the Bahamas back to Florida. And so that was kind of the journey that I embarked on almost 4 years ago when we first started talking about it in 2020, and then started working on it in 2021. And originally it was supposed to be a 10 or 20-minute film, but the nature of documentary filmmaking is that things never go as planned. And so it became a 44-minute documentary and a 3-year journey. So
Yeah. So let me show, I'm going to show the pilot or the trailer for this. Let me just get it up here and show it to you. And so this will give you a pretty good idea of what the film is about. Let me go back up here and see if I can launch this. Here we go.
I'm going to grab my computer charger while you're doing that.
Okay, great. Go ahead. I'm going to stop this and restart it here because I've looked at this a bunch of times. It always starts in the middle. And let me share my screen so you guys can see this. Desktop one. Can everybody see my screen now? Okay. So here's a little 2-minute trailer for this. You'll see a lot of Makayla's work in here.
To all of the children that are sitting in the hospital beds right now, and how they would love to be doing anything besides sitting in a hospital bed. And I know that because I was one of them. So I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when I was 3 months of age. I had bacterial pneumonia, and it had in my lungs. You're either going to get a lung transplant and walk out of here, or you're not leaving. I started making a list of things that I always wanted to do in my life. Someday, I'd like to do triathlon. Coming from somebody who can barely walk, that's a pretty profound statement.
The crossing for cystic fibrosis is one of the most challenging endurance events in the world, both physically and mentally, because you're paddling 80 miles across the ocean. It doesn't matter how much you train, because the ocean is the X factor. Scott has a lot of considerations with his health.
Started experiencing a little bit of stomach issue. I'm not sure if it was seasickness.
There was some concern that we weren't going to make it. We had not even reached the halfway mark at that point. I would get this bright blue lights, and it was magic.
This event comes back around to sum up what has been my life.
The fact that Scott Johnson is paddling with somebody else's lungs is really mind-blowing.
This was my purpose for coming through what I went through, was to tell my story and inspire people.
Very cool. So you saw a lot of the work there. You lot underwater work, aerial work, above ground work.
Beautiful footage.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the crew on this. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about here, but let's talk about the crew. You actually hired people to come out.
Professor Baker, I'm going to mute myself, that way everybody can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah. So and there's music. You can really hear it, but there's music to the trailer too. But yeah, so this was, I think, really an amazing project to work on, because obviously I was able to hire the crew. And so I hired a friend that I had worked with at a big camp experience that I had, who's just an amazing drone pilot. Like, that's what he specializes in. So a lot of the drone footage, some of it is mine and some of it is his, like from the actual crossing, that's his. So we had, for his actual crossing, we had 4 or 5 cinematographers total, but for the actual crossing, there were 3 of us. So, the way the crossing is, like, you were on that, like, there was a bunch of us on the catamaran, and we go across with the paddlers, and it's just like an incredible experience. So we had, Colin on the drone, and then we had Michael, who's an awesome cinematographer, and he was capturing stuff. And then I was kind of filling in and capturing some of the ground cinematography. And then a lot of pretty much all the underwater cinematography in the film is mine. And, you know, I think it just goes back to the importance of being able to put the right people in the right places, especially for shooting something as uncontrolled as, you know, an ocean crossing. Really anything in the outdoors can be very uncontrolled. So I think it goes back to just building those relationships with people and really trusting them. And, you know, this is something, you know, Mr. Randy, that you obviously inspired in me. And that is like, you have your kind of, and you'll see this even in like big movies where like they have their go-to crew, you know, like Steven Spielberg only works with the same people. And it's because you're pulling really long hours doing things and you want to work with people that like are a joy to be around and they're really good at what they do. So like, I can't, you know, overestimate that enough.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, you know, and you'll find that it's not, you know, if it's like Makayla was saying, if you look at like Clint Eastwood and Wes Anderson and Francis Ford Coppola and those, they work with the same people over and over again because you develop a language. They know, you know, what you're looking for, and you have this language. And again, you hear people hear me say this all the time in my class. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're a jerk and nobody wants to be around you, then you're not going to get jobs. You spend most of your life with these people, you know, more usually than your family, especially if you're on a documentary or a series or a feature film. So if you're not fun to be around, people don't want to work with you. So you gotta be fun. And so that's always been my big thing, you know, when people say, you know, if you talk to most people who work with me, they'll tell you I'm usually the one smiling the biggest on the set because I have fun. You know, if I'm not having fun, I'm doing something wrong. And again,
Yeah.
you've heard me say that multiple times. If you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. Deborah, you had a question?
You said Francis Ford Coppola. You said Ford Coppola. That man shot The Godfather.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So, so yeah, somebody was saying, hi, using that many cameras, what was your lenses and ND of choice?
So, well, we had the drone, and then Michael was shooting on Canon, and I was shooting on Sony. Yeah, I was shooting on my Sony, actually, A7S II, because we filmed that back in 2022. And, you know, I'm a very minimalist with my gear, and I'm kind of like of the philosophy that like 80%, 70 to 80% is your craft as a filmmaker, and like 20 to 30% is your gear. So for this documentary, I was shooting on a SLR Magic. It was a 25 millimeter. So I was shooting on the gimbal, and then Michael was shooting with a telephoto on his Canon, I believe. I don't remember exactly which lens, but it was definitely more of a telephoto lens. And then ND, I'm just gonna say I don't always use ND. I probably should, and I'm using it more. But sometimes, like when you're in those sorts of situations, you don't have time. I mean, if you're using a variable ND, you can, but sometimes you just don't have time. So you do the technically incorrect thing and you crank up your shutter speed.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's it. And so Makayla and I are always working together on things, and you know, again, I learned probably as much from her as she learns from me. So, but we'll get you there with ND filters, you know. And so that's part of the problem with using an FX3. However, there is no ND filters, guys, and so even shooting on DSLR cameras, there's no ND filters. So you got to put a variable ND on, and so all of that stuff. So we got a few minutes left here. We got about 10 minutes left here. I'm going to open it up. Sorry, Deborah, I cut you off. Go ahead. Do you have another question?
I literally saw a studio binding video about Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather. Like, I swear they told us in DC, but I'm gonna go. I'm not kidding. They still talking about studio binding. That man's a legend.
Yep, he is. He's one of it. Anthony, you got a question?
I'm going on mute.
I do. If there's anything that you wish that someone would have told you, fast forward to today, what would you want? What would you have liked someone to have shared with you that you can share with us that will help you tremendously catapult your career into the stratosphere of success?
Oh man, that's a tough question because I feel like there's so many things that I feel like I'm still learning. And in all different facets. I think the secret is there's not one secret, you know? I think like there's not one piece of advice. I think what I'm continuing to realize, and maybe I would have liked to have reminded myself, is like, and I continue to remind myself, is that like you have to work really, really hard, and you have to be persistent and consistent. You know, it isn't just enough to have like the creative skills. You really have to be, I think, especially in today's world, you have to be you know, willing to take risks and willing to work really, really hard. Because I think the honest truth is like there is a lot of opportunity out there, more so than there ever was, you know, because everyone's in need of content, and video content has just exploded, but there's also a lot of competition too. So I think it's like, it's not enough to just have like, you know, the talent, skills, or whatever it is. Like you really have to, you know, be a hard worker, be, you know, consistent and persistent, and also just having the people skills to like make connections, and you know, I think going back to what Randy said of being that person that's just like a joy to work with in order to really set yourself apart. I don't know if does that answer your question?
And so one of the big things I could tell you, and one of the reasons why we brought Makayla in here today, was because I want you to realize that, you know, she's a visual storyteller. She is a visual storyteller. She shoots, she edits, she writes, she does music, she does the graphics a lot of times. I mean, you even did the digital negatives for the film festival. You had to go through and learn how to do all that and for the film festival and get that taken care of. And so you as a you know, independent filmmaker, you're out there doing everything. You're like really just, you know, doing, and quite honestly, there's not a lot of people out there that can do that. There's not a lot of people who can shoot and edit and write and create visual stories on their own. There just isn't, you know, and you guys are finding that out, how hard that is as you're going through and doing this stuff and doing it well. And you've been doing this now really 15 years. You've been doing this.
Well, not 15, probably like 10 or 12
Yeah,
years.
so yeah, it's you know, and it goes by pretty fast. You know, it's a blink of the eye, really, over what you're doing. So, and you got a premiere coming up here next week.
Yeah, so we have two premieres. I don't know how many students are local to the Florida area, but we have one actually down in Jupiter, Florida, February 1st. And then we have one February 3rd, which is going to be up here in Melbourne. So the tickets are on Eventbrite. I think I sent you that link, Randy, but would love to have anyone come out. But I did want to answer the one question. I think Timothy asked, how do you deal with the competition? And I was like going to write an answer, but I'll just like share it real quick. I think like just continuing in excellence, you know, and pursuing like education, obviously, whether that's in business or that's like in filmmaking. And I think, you know, passion goes a long way. I think that's one thing that I feel like has separated me from the competition, or I felt like has worked. And that is like when people see that you're really passionate and you're willing to like, you know, go the extra mile and do whatever it takes, like they want to work with you. And so I think that's a huge thing, and pursuing your passion and not letting that, you know, die just because it's a business. And that's just like, that's a line that you really like have to walk very finely. And so those are just a couple things, you know, and kind of finding that niche of where you want to go. And eventually, you know, the people that you're supposed to work with, like if you keep working hard and being persistent and pursuing excellence and having a passion, like the right jobs will come in time.
Great. Perfect. Anybody else have any other questions? I just want to show some other bits of work here. Let me find my here we go. Share screen. I'm going to share my screen here with you. So, can you talk to us about this commercial?
This one, oh, this was the Bahama Beach Club I did.
Rum punches, Gombe smash, Bahama Mamas, pina coladas, what the bar drinks are.
And so, what was the crew like on this?
Orange juice, pineapple.
So this was actually
Drinks are
this was me as a one-woman show, which was exhausting. But I was actually asked by a photographer. He was going over to take to do this job over at the beach club, and so they wanted a videographer, but you know, budget wise it didn't make sense to bring over multiple people and just with the needs of the project. So I ended up coming along and shooting like all of their different yeah, we do the diving one. The diving one's really cool. But we got to kind of go over and just really shoot like a lot of the activities surrounding not just the resort, but like the diving, and it was just such a cool experience. It was really awesome. So that's like flying the drone from the boat. We got to go on this crazy reef.
And Jonathan put the Eventbrite thing.
Yeah. I was gonna do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. So you can see some pretty incredible underwater stuff. You know, it's really pretty cool.
One of the best things I think we have here is the marine life, the underwater adventures, exploring the coral reefs.
They've done studies here, and they find that the coral of the abaco is the strongest in the world. And the reef is beautiful.
What is in the sea, under the water, is an amazing adventure. And it's always something new every time.
So yeah, it was a fun one.
Yeah, so you find yourself shooting a lot of interviews and then B-roll with stuff. And again, I would highly advise you to go and check out Makayla's website, because she does a really good job on her website. She's got, you can look at some of her clients and stuff. You can look at customer testimonials, which I think everybody should do. And you can see she's got a whole blog, and I think it's important that people do blogs. And if you look at some of the, aerial footage, it's just great looking stuff. I'm always just blown away. And do you have the Freedom one on here by any chance? You did a Freedom.
Is that all the way down at the bottom?
Yeah.
Well, that was one of them actually. The one with the backpack right there. Scroll up. This one, yeah. This is the shorter one I did in Yosemite. So this is these endurance hikes they do to stop human trafficking. It's really cool.
So on this one, it was you with a camera handheld, and you used the gimbal a lot.
Oh wait, is this? Oh, this might be the different video.
Yeah.
Power of us. We're the ones who aren't afraid to get a little wind.
Yeah, this is
the videos. You've done commercials. You've done corporate videos. You've done branded videos. You've done a little bit of everything.
Inspiration givers.
Yeah.
So that's it. So that's I just want you to see. I'm just trying to figure out if you've got any of the effervescent stuff or the bioluminescent stuff on here.
Yeah, go to portfolio and go down. Let me see here. Keep going right there. The Finn Expeditions, the kayaking. Click that.
Yeah, Finn Expeditions. So check out some of this footage. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's right there.
This is bioluminescence, and so you shot this with the FX or the
A7S2. This was back in 2020. Now the cameras obviously are a lot better, but it was fun. This was 4 years ago.
Yeah, but for the time, this was great looking stuff for what out there. And you sold this as stock footage, correct?
Yes. So there was a production company that was doing an America series, kind of like Planet Earth, and they had reached out, but I think it was like a series on America that was going to be shown in different countries, and they reached out and ended up licensing one of the dolphin clips, which was pretty cool. One of these clips of the dolphin.
So it's just a tremendous amount of stuff. And again, you had to learn how to shoot bioluminescence.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that you just go out and do, right? You
No.
spend some time learning how to do this in the right settings and all that stuff. So it's really important, as you go through this stuff that you learn how to do all this. Okay, so I want to be respectful and not keep you any longer. Anybody have any questions? Okay,
Yeah, just one. The premiere on February 1st. Can you share the information in the chat so I can see if I can make it to the Jupiter?
It's right here. There's an Eventbrite. If you look at Jonathan's thing he posted.
That's the one in Melbourne. So there's two.
Okay.
I'll find you let me do the Jupiter one.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second.
So yeah, I would highly, if you haven't been to a premiere before, I would highly suggest you come out and check it out. It's pretty fun. I'll be at the Melbourne one. So it's pretty cool. But again, you're the one who set all this up, right? You you had to do all this. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like this film is like giving me even more of a like literally from conception to handing it off in DCP format to the theater. It's been like I've gotten the whole gamut, which I think is really great because then every facet of the documentary. So
talk about DCP for a lot of people who don't know what that means when you say DCP.
So if you ever want to like show your film in a film festival or like say do your own premiere at a festival, which is what we did, we just rented out like, local theaters. It has to be in digital cinema package, which is actually a folder of files. So it has to be converted from like an MOV, like a ProRes MOV or like an MP4. You have to use a software and you have to convert it. They want it in DCP, which is digital cinema package. And then you give that to them on a hard drive. So, if you're ever in that situation, like with a film festival or whatever, or a premiere, it always helps to do it sooner rather than later. That way, like they can work out any bugs or anything. Because sometimes there's little glitches, between reading. Their projector has to ingest it and read all that information and then be able to play it. So.
And if people want to get a hold of you, Thomas is asking, hey, it's not near the ocean, but if a project came up in Wyoming, would you be interested?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I love Wyoming.
Yeah. So what's your email? We'll put it in.
I'll send it over. I'll send it in the chat.
That's it. Okay. So anybody else have any more questions before we go? Makayla, W. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for doing this for us. Yeah. One last question.
By any chance, will this recorded video be sent through email?
We can't send it through email, but it will be up. It will be up on wearedcbs.com in the next week, and it will also be up on Full Sail One as well within about a week or so. So you'll have
access to
it. Yeah, no problem. Okay. Again, thank you so much, Makayla. I can't tell you how much I really appreciate it. Makayla and I just went out 2 weeks ago and shot birds over at the Merritt Island wildlife thing. So I live vicariously through her most of the time. So but I really appreciate it. And thanks again for everybody coming out. And we'll have this up soon. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Makayla. Again,
yeah, for sure. Thank you all so much. Yeah, if you have any questions, and would love to see you guys at the premiere. So I'm still learning, but I'm open book to share anything that I've learned thus far. So
cool. Thanks. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming out. I really appreciate it. Okay. Bye.